1 year of war on the European continent. We want to do just that with two friends of the program we have relied on for their insight, analysis, and coverage throughout the last year, including national security expert, CEO of Global Risk and Intelligence Planning, Hal Kempfer, and former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us here. I wanted to first start with this question. We can start with you, Hal, because I think a lot of people are wondering, can Ukraine win this war? If so, what is it going to take in year two? Because I only ask because some of the U.S. materiel, tanks, support are going to get to Ukraine very later on. We know that many reports have suggested the Russian offensive is already underway. Are you concerned about this? Hal, you first.
Well, Andrew, I'm slightly concerned, but the offensive has been rather anemic. And I think it's not so much what they've done, it's what they haven't been able to do that really gets my attention. One of the things that hasn't been covered that much is, even though we see a lot with the Bakhmut offensive, they have pulled forces and moved forces across the front. So there's some lines that really aren't as reinforced as they were. And I think that's an opportunity. You know, raw numbers are one thing, you know, looking at the total number of tanks and everything else that we're sending over. But, you know, very soon they're going to have about a battalion of Leopard 2 tanks. And not too long after that, there'll be a couple of battalions, which is most of a brigade. And even though that may not seem like much, if concentrated and used in the right sector, and this is all intelligence driven, you can do some pretty amazing things. And if you can punch a hole, do that breakout, even if you just do an armored raid, go in and take out a logistics site and then come back, what that would do to the cohesion of the Russian forces across the front would be one thing, but to the psychology. The Achilles heel of the Russian forces is really their will to fight. It's just simply not been there consistently since the very beginning.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm going to put up this tweet as well. This from the Kyiv Independent with the Prime Minister of Ukraine with photos of the first 4 Leopard 2 tanks delivered by Poland. They are there in Ukraine as of today. Ambassador Volker, President Joe Biden sat down with ABC News today, to which he was asked about F-16s to Ukraine. He said, no, he, meaning Zelensky, does not need F-16s now. Do you agree?
I think, you know, it's need F-16s now. There's a lot of holes in that sentence. And so I would say that we ought to be doing everything we can to get aircraft to Ukraine as quickly as possible, train their pilots, train their crews, make sure there's a logistics tail. That will take time. But if we want to be able to deliver something later, we got to start doing it today. And this is true not only of F-16s, but other types of aircraft that would be very useful as well. And I mentioned A-10s several times in the past year. They're sitting in our desert. We're not using them. And they're decommissioned, and they could just be moved over and put to good use by the Ukrainians. So I think in that sense, you know, Biden may be right saying, look, the most important thing for Ukraine right now is long-range artillery and tanks. Okay, I agree with that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't start the process going of getting them the other equipment as well.
You know, and Hal, to you, we've talked about this before, and there is increasing concern. I hear it sometimes from the people in my life about, well, what about ammunition? What about our military here? Are we dwindling our stockpiles because we are sending so much to Ukraine? Is that valid? Is that operative?
Well, it's operative, and it is valid. I mean, we are looking at our stockpiles. Frankly, the numbers we use to project what a war like this would take were frankly a little too, underwhelming, shall we say. This has been rather overwhelming in terms of the amount of ammunition being used, and that's brought a lot of attention to our defense industrial base, ramping up some of these supply chain issues that we've been running into. With that said, I think what was done today, that package of $2 billion, there's a lot of stuff in there in the ammunition sector, which I think is very good. But the other side, too, is, you know, don't think Russia has an unlimited amount of ammunition. They've got some serious hurdles they have to work with, and there's some anecdotal stuff coming out that a lot of this ammunition going into the frontline forces is rusty, it's old, it's inoperable. And so Russia has significantly decreased the amount of firepower they've been throwing at the front line over a period of time. In fact, in some cases, 75% less than what they were doing before. I think that's an indicator of where they're at. So it's not a zero-sum game that we're going to run out of ammunition. It's a parity game to see where it's at. And of course, the difference between us and the Russians is when we use multiple launch rocket systems and we use artillery, we actually hit the target. They just tend to throw stuff out and do blanket bombing, and hence why they take so many civilian casualties. It's a different way of thinking, and one of the things we're doing now is we're actually improving the ability to do that precision targeting to make sure we're using that ammunition in the best way possible.
Yeah. Ambassador Volker, there was an exclusive report in the Wall Street Journal today essentially saying that there are talks about a possible defense pact with NATO and Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine wants to be in the bloc. What does a defense pact mean, you think?
Yeah, I think everyone's looking for euphemisms here. Ukraine wants a security guarantee so that they're not attacked by Russia again in the future. They need to deter the idea of Russia attacking them. The only thing that has ever worked in Europe for that purpose is NATO. NATO membership works. The Budapest Memorandum that Ukraine signed along with the US, UK, France, and Russia back in '95, which said Ukraine gives up nuclear weapons and everyone guarantees their border. Well, that was worth the paper it was written on. And if you look in the future and you say, okay, well, the United States should give a security guarantee to Ukraine. Well, why should we do that alone? Why wouldn't we want all of our NATO allies to join us in committing to defend Ukraine in the future? Or flip it around. If the US is not part of that, do you think Vladimir Putin's going to believe that Europe's going to come to Ukraine's defense if the United States is not? So I think it has to be NATO in the end.
Okay, in year two, gentlemen, also included in that report, there was some possible urging amongst European leaders, German leaders, French leaders, to get Zelensky to at least consider some type of negotiated settlement, to at least consider starting up peace talks again. Do European leaders have that leverage right now, do you think? And will Zelensky listen or abide by it?
Zelensky is the wrong target of that conversation.
Okay.
Vladimir Putin is the one who's attacking Ukraine and who's committed to continue fighting. Zelensky and the Ukrainian people would sign a peace agreement in a heartbeat if Russia withdrew their forces and promised not to attack again, and that there would be peace if Russia withdrew. But unfortunately, that's not the situation. Russia's the one continuing this war. And so the position that all of us are in is making sure Ukraine has the tools necessary to defend itself.
Hal, I want to pose this question to you. Vladimir Putin gave a speech this week, kind of almost like a Russian State of the Union. He gave an update on the war. What is he thinking right now? Is he cornered? Is he delusional? Is he emboldened?
I don't know if he's delusional, but he's kind of caught in his own information space, if you will. He has laid this out in such a way that there's really not an escape hatch for him to go. As his former speechwriter said, there's no plan B that he can really do. So he's kind of doubling down on his initial goals. He's just basically using hyper-nationalist rhetoric across the board. He's trying to continue this whole thing of painting into we're fighting against the West and that all these Western nations are somehow coalesced against us, and creating this illusion that somehow Ukraine or the West started this war to begin with. So he's doing that, but I think the problem is he's painted himself into a corner, and politically, I don't know how he gets out of this, because if and when, and it's probably going to be when, the counteroffensive begins, when those tanks get in there, when the JDAMs and some of these other munitions are being used to full effect, when you see Russian forces starting to fall back, and I see that as in some places it could be a rout of Russian forces. When that happens, I think the political reverberations in Moscow are going to be very significant. I don't think there is really that much Russian at the average Russian citizen level. I don't know if there really is that much support for what's going on.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to say anything, but I don't think there's a lot of support there. And I could see things change quickly, which is kind of how things historically in Russia go.
Yeah. I want to put up this graphic, and when we're talking about how everyday Russian citizens perceive the war, the casualty figures are just stunning, because we have not seen this level of figures like this since World War II. I want to get both of your thoughts on this. We have some estimates. This is according to Fox News reporting and research that Ukraine has lost about 120,000 soldiers, Russia around 200,000. We have not seen figures of this type in such a long time. Do you think they get lost in abstraction, or is this hitting home?
Well, I'll jump on that one if I could. And I'd say that I think, first off, we don't really know the numbers. Both sides try to conceal them. Secondly, those numbers, casualties, include both killed and injured. And I suspect that the numbers are actually higher than what you showed, if you're concluding all killed and all injured. But then the final thing is that the Ukrainians can bear this because they're defending their homeland. They don't have a choice. They know they have to fight to protect their families, their friends, their loved ones, their territory, their country. So it's rough, it's difficult, it's wearing, it's tiring, but they're going to fight. The Russians, on the other hand, you're going to have families, mothers, different regions of the country that are looking at the losses that they've had, and in their minds, it's for what? What are we doing this for? Why are we attacking Ukraine? And why are we paying the price? So I think it plays out very differently in both societies.
Hal, you talk about the mothers of Russia all the time.
I think the mothers of Russia is something that's often underestimated. We've seen it historically in the past, but there will be that point to where the body count, if you will, just gets too much. And frankly, I don't think Putin is very adept at managing some of this stuff in terms of Russian soldiers returning home who've been lost limbs or severely wounded, let alone coming back in coffins. And there's been a lot of reporting that they're actually hiding that. Field crematoriums in order to hide the number of losses they have, the inability of Russian families to get hold of their loved ones that are deployed within Ukraine. And I don't know when the critical mass on that hits, but historically it has happened in the past, and I don't think this is going to be an exception to that rule.
All right, just want to get final thoughts as we are now in year 2. There does not seem to be an end in sight. What are some of the storylines, Ambassador Volker, you'll be kind of monitoring in year 2?
Well, I think there are several, and I wouldn't necessarily agree there's not an end in sight.
Okay.
We just don't know when.
Okay.
And a lot of things can happen as to how, but I think we can say already today, Ukraine survives as a sovereign, independent European democracy. Russia will be an outcast, pariah state under sanctions as long as Putin is in power and as long as its forces are in Ukraine. And Russia does not have the military means to win this war. So those are things we can say now. So what we have to then think about is, how does this play out over a year or more? And I think the way it plays out, and Hal said some of this, Russia will not be able to mount a successful offensive this year. They are not giving their forces time for training. They don't have the equipment. They're not getting organized into formations. This great offensive we keep hearing about appears to be a fizzle.
Okay.
On the other side, the Ukrainians will likely have one or more successful counteroffensives this year. And I agree with Hal that that will cause some soul searching in Moscow. Okay. People will start asking, what are we doing, and is it working, and what do we do next? So I think by the autumn, we're going to be seeing some very different perspectives about how Russia is dealing with this war, and questions about where Putin has taken the country.
All right. Hal, final thoughts?
My thoughts are, I don't know when it's going to happen. I see something happening probably in the late spring, which will be very surprising. I don't know if it'll be a Kharkiv type thing, but I see something happening. But I do see by the latter half of the summer, there's going to be some very effective counteroffensives that may shift the whole tone of the war. And I think it's one thing to see what happens in Ukraine. The other part of that is to see what the reverberations will be in Moscow. The seeds of change have been sown. And I think what happens on the ground in Ukraine will literally shake things up in Moscow in a major way. And it could be a shift if that happens, that could potentially end the war sooner rather than later.
All right.
And hey, Andrew, if I could, I just want to give a shout out to Trey Yingst, your journalist on the ground there. He has done a phenomenal job all year. And he's not only right in reporting the facts the way he does, but he's given people perspective that you wouldn't get any other way. So he deserves a lot of credit.
Definitely.
And Fox deserves a lot of credit for having him there.
No, definitely. Thank you so much. Ambassador Kurt Volker and Hal Kempfer. We'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.